we were happy with our kids being anti-war demonstrators.
Patriotic?
We felt that this was a patriotic way to express themselves. I think it's important for us to express patriotism. And even when you feel like patriotism should be expressed in a nonviolent way, it isn't that you don't love your country.
You're looking at two, what I call, sweet Kansas folks. I'm David Hoffman, filmmaker, and you're about to see more of them speaking. Now, the time is 1989 when I'm interviewing them, and you need to know a few things about them and about the time in order to understand what they're saying. So first off, it was a fractured time we're talking about. 1968, 1969, the country is split, kind of like today. Total partisan divide. 50% against the war in Vietnam. 50% for the war in Vietnam. Two polar different points of view, and fighting is going on everywhere. Their son, these two Kansas folks, he became a protester, an anti-war protester, and a conscientious objector because they're Quakers. They're best friends, co-workers. I think actually these people worked for them. Their son entered the war and died in combat. That totally split these people, and you'll hear them talk about that. Before I run this, Kansans, who I've come to know quite well, decent folk, honorable, straight shooting, calm, with their own subtle sense of humor. That's all in this interview. So I hope it has meaning for you, and I want to thank these folks and all the people in my series for giving themselves to these interviews.
Just in general, was it, as you look back on the 60s now from this perspective today, can you summarize for me what it was? Was it invigorating? Was it traumatic? Was it energizing? Was it demoralizing?
Part of the 60s were devastating. They were interesting. It was a learning time for every generation that was alive, I think. I can't help but think of my mother. My mother, being a generation beyond me, and yet anything that her grandchildren did, and there was a lot of things that were troubling, she loved them, and she corresponded with them, and I guess that's one of the invigorating things that, if you're talking about energy that happened in the 60s, we learned to accept a lot of things and realize what was important. Sort of like blowing away the chaff and looking to what's important.
When you think back on your disciplining of your children, your working with your children, your tolerance of your children, do you think sometimes maybe in second thoughts that maybe you should have been a little less tolerant? Do you think sometimes that you'd have done better if you weren't the wonderfully compassionate parents that I wish I had?
Oh.
Uh-oh, I think we've got the wrong picture painted here completely.
Well, I think we've sometimes wondered if we didn't communicate enough with our children, and they didn't. I think oftentimes we thought, well, they'll pick up these things just by being in our home.
Osmosis.
Yeah, just by brushing against us. But maybe we were too foggy about that kind of thing. Maybe we should have spoken out more plainly. And Wanda's always been good about talking to the kids, so I think we talked with them quite a bit, but I wonder if maybe we didn't speak quite plainly enough in trying to help them to understand why we felt the way we did and what our ideals were and why we had these ideals. But yet I think after everything has transpired, we came out okay. I think they came through okay.
They're all loving, caring human beings. They haven't all chosen the same faith as we have, and that's not really important to us either, so long as they have a faith.
I think we've learned to love our kids no matter what age they are, and after they get to a certain point, we love them and kind of keep hands off. Just say, well, you're going to have to figure it out yourself. And we try not to be insistent or pushy or.
I know one very important thing we've learned. We've learned how important it is to listen. Well, you can give advice till you're blue in the face, but if nobody's hearing you, it doesn't do any good. But if you have your child beside you and you listen to what that person's saying and really try to feel what that person's saying, whether it's your child or anybody, I think that's a gift.
When it came to the situation that you went through with the Smiths, now looking back on it in retrospect, was it painful but necessary? Was it painful and yet there was something learned from that experience too? About life, about human nature?
Well, I think it was probably, when you think about the workplace and the differences politically that people have in the workplace, I think it helped us to realize that you must be very sensitive about how you approach talking about things in the workplace when you disagree. But I think, we have a good friendship. I think we have a good relationship with the Smiths now, and that's pretty important too. To work through your differences and come to realize what's really important, that it's important to have these friendships.
What's your greatest single regret about the 60s? We talked about all the really good things that happened, but is there something that you feel for yourself personally now?
I don't know. You can't really look back and change things, and what's happened, we tried to do the best we could at the time. I know there were things that we said to our children, or at least I said to the children, that I'd like to change. Maybe we should have been more, more stern, I don't know.
Well, sometimes I look back on that period of time and wonder maybe if I would have been better off to be out in the streets more myself instead of sitting back and working all the time and not being so actively involved as I really wasn't very actively involved. Our hearts were with lots of the demonstrating that was going on, anti-war and some of the racial tension, trying to help with that, but we were kind of reticent to jump in and go and march with folks. We didn't do that, and I sometimes feel like we should have more than we did.
You do. I don't.
Oh.
I guess I just don't. I just never felt that I was a demonstrating kind. That wasn't my bag. I could talk to people on the phone. I could talk to people on a one-to-one basis. I was glad to go and knock on doors and visit with people about politics and tell them who I thought they should vote for.
Well, you were standing up and being counted. That's what I'm talking about.
But as far as demonstrating, I've never, that just really hasn't been something that I felt was what I wanted to put my energy into. And it's not because I disagree with it. It's just wasn't one of the things that I felt like putting my energy into. Our son did demonstrate during the Vietnam War, particularly when recruiters came on the campus. And we were very proud of him for demonstrating and standing up and showing what he believed. Maybe we let him talk for us sometimes in doing this. But this was great as far as we were concerned. We supported him. we felt that this was a patriotic way to express themselves. I think it's important for us to express patriotism. And even when you feel like patriotism should be expressed in a nonviolent way, it isn't that you don't love your country. We love our country.
Last thing, we painted a picture of the 50s being a certain kind of way. It seemed like a good time to be alive, and so on and so forth. Then we come to the end of 1960, or we come to 1973 or 74. Help me understand that difference. Are we a better country for all of that?
We're a different country because of all the things that happened in the 60s, and I think we probably are a better country.
I hope we're more cautious about getting involved in other countries' little internal struggles than we were.
I hope we'll get better yet than we are now. I wonder if some of the violence that we have in our society today is because of some of the anger that might have been stirred in the 60s, because there is a lot of violence in our country. Of course, the drug culture has something to do with that, too. But you would wonder, maybe, if some of the anger is being expressed from some of the things that happened in the 60s to make our country have the amount of violence that we have.
Are we more tolerant than we used to be?
I think we're more tolerant than we used to be.
I think we have to be more tolerant than we used to be, because we have so many different peoples coming into our country, and we find out that they have the same kinds of emotions and aspirations and lifestyle and life expectations that we have, and I think we've learned to respect all kinds of nationalities that we live with. I guess we thought we'd learned that 50 years ago, but we somehow have to learn it all over again.
I think some of the sexual revolution, too, that we have now, speaking of tolerance, I think that we become tolerant of our sexuality. Women have found a stronger role in living, and gay people are finding a place in life and recognizing that they're normal. And I think that this is something that we have a ways to go, but we're getting there. I hope we've become better people since the 60s. I know we learned a lot from the 60s. I think that we've become more vocal. I think we have a lot of friends because of some of the things that we lived through, some of the things we lived through together. And I think life is different because of the 60s. I think that we've gone in different directions than we did maybe in the 50s.
I was going to say, I think some of the rabble rousers proved to be trendsetters, and proved that it takes a lot of kicking and screaming and shouting to change things, and it's hard for people to see that when it's happening. Sometimes society has to be tugged and pulled and beat on to make changes that are needed sometimes.
I often think of it like a pendulum on the clock. Sometimes it has to swing a little bit too far one way to come back and recognize the values that are really important. The things, it's not important how long your hair is, for instance. It's important that you're kind. It's important that you care about people.
I hope our children will understand the tearing that always takes place when the cord is broken with their children as they get to that point. Some of our grandchildren are getting to that point, so.
Another thing I've noticed is that parents are always the insurance policy. No matter how old your family gets, you're the insurance policy. And I hope that we can always be a support to not only just our little family, but the wider family.